Welcome back to the Better Business Podcast. My name is Mike and this is Rob. And today's topic, we're going to discuss what it truly takes to establish a business. And we're going to go through the ins and outs of establishing a business. I'm with my fellow entrepreneur friend here, Robert Ambrosini, who recently just opened up his first bakery and coffee shop. So if you're local to Quincy, please stop by Roots and Roast. But we're going to hear from him and myself some of the topics and some of the constraints and challenges that we've been through establishing a business and kind of have a discussion around that. So, welcome, Rob. So, the first kind of key topic I want to discuss in this particular podcast is knowing yourself and seeing if you are really up for the challenge of starting your business. And I want to kind of let that carry that over to Rob and have him discuss kind of what he's been through establishing this bakery that we're actually sitting in as of right now.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Thank you, appreciate it. So we'll be doing most, if not all, of the episodes here from now on, but we'll see. I like the setting, but so this is something that came to mind for me as this should be step one in this process of your kind of business startup planning is asking yourself the hard question: is this even something that I should be doing, right? And so one of the important questions here, I think, is your relationship with responsibility. So ask yourself, am I someone who volunteers to take on responsibility, or am I someone who is kind of shy with it and shies away from it? And you have to be honest with that. Like, it's easy to think that, we all want to think highly of ourselves. It's hard. It's actually very hard to have very honest awareness of yourself, particularly when it comes to something that, we all think of, obviously I take on responsibility. That's a very virtuous thing. It's there's not everyone does. And in fact, most people don't. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's why a lot of people do just default to, I'd rather be an employee, and, I need employees. So I need people. I couldn't run this place on my own. So I need people that don't want to take on all the responsibility. They take on the responsibility of the day to day, and that's enough for them, and they're happy with it. They're more than happy to keep their heads off the chopping block if something happens and the business is going under or whatever. You're having a crisis. It's they deal with it to the extent that they have to, and then the rest is on me to figure out and solve for, right? So that's something that you just need to square up with yourself is what are the responsibilities going to be for owning this business? Business ownership ultimately is responsibility. And so depending on the industry and the size of the business, how many people are going to be under your employ, right? There's a lot of things to consider there with how much responsibility you are going to be taking on. I can tell you for this with the cafe, I'm doing most of the just management. So I'm pretty hands off as far as just dealing with serving customers, for example. But I'm doing a lot of stuff in the background. I'm doing this part time with still doing my consulting and my net green work. So when I'm working on the cafe stuff, I'm doing things like going to pick up inventory, doing orders. I'm trying to automate as much as I can, and that's something that's important to me. Is you automate wherever you can, and you save yourself time. But just those day to day things of making sure that we do have we're well stocked. Setting the example on cleaning up, I'm more than happy to get my hands dirty, cleaning around here and that sort of stuff. And doing all the accounting, don't take that for granted. Yeah. The accounting, paying your vendors, all that stuff, it all takes time. And like I said, I try to automate as much as I can. I have QuickBooks linked up to my bank account as a stupid example, right? It just saves a lot of time.
A lot of time.
Yeah.
So it sounds like obviously you have some skin in the game here. You started your own business. What do you think? Because obviously it's know yourself, right? And what do you think kind of contrast between you, business owner, to someone who's thinking about it or might not be the best fit for starting their business? What differentiates yourself to someone who's not in that capacity, ready to go all in?
Yeah, okay. Then now see, you're turning the hard questions on me, and I appreciate it. So if one of the things that I do well, so I'll start with this. One of the things that I do well is I'm the type of person that it's not that I don't do this in a way to try and be offensive to people, but I'm just the type of person where, like, if I want something done, it's the old adage, like, if you want something done right, you do it yourself, right? That's a general attitude that I have with things. My father's a carpenter, and one of the lessons that he used to teach me is, like, if you see a problem that needs solved, you just do it. Like, you can tell me about what you had to do after the fact. Like, just if you see something that needs to be done, just do it. And so that's something that's, like, always stayed with me. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm the most timely person in the world, but, like, luckily I'm in the food service industry now, so I fit right in.
Right.
But I make up for that in other ways. Like, I'm very dependable. Like, if I say I'm going to get something done, I'm going to get something done. I don't let things fall through the cracks. I keep myself organized, right? So I have my checklist for this is what I got to do each week. This is what I do each month. So here's my week close. Here's my month close. Here's my quarter close. Like, I keep those things in order. That's really, I think, one of the key things to think about is just like, are you someone who can keep, because you're not just keeping yourself organized, you're keeping a business organized. So you're keeping everyone organized, right? Like, it's important for each individual in your employ to keep themselves organized, of course, and you want people who can, like, maintain some semblance of order. Like, you're not going to hire everyone because of, like, they're orderly or not orderly. It's like, there's other important things to consider there, but you want to make sure that people can, like, clean up after themselves, and, like, they can kind of delineate their own responsibilities and keep themselves organized, right? But ultimately it all comes up to you, and you're at the head of it, and you need to keep them and everything, all the pieces, fit together and organized together. And that's the thing that I do well, that with, like I said, just the dependability and that attitude of, like, I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and just do this myself,
Yeah.
right? If you're And people always say, another one you always hear is, like, oh, you got to be able to wear many hats. It's like, there's a lot of truth to that, because especially when you're starting out, even if you're not going to do everything yourself, you have to know how, like, at least some level on how to do everything yourself, because you need to be able to speak intelligently to the people that are going to solve your problems for you if you're not going to solve them yourself directly, right? So you do have to be more of a generalist. You have to be able to take on the responsibility. You got to be dependable. If you say you're going to do something, you have to be able to do it, and you got to be orderly. You got to be organized. If you're not organized, things are just going to start falling through the cracks, and you're going to have a lot more headaches, because your problems are going to be getting bigger when they're not being addressed. And then they're going to be, like, resurfacing, and then you're going to have these problems resurfacing over and over again. They're going to be bigger and worse, like, every time.
Yeah. And so it sounds like accountability starts from the top and then kind of triggers down.
Yeah.
As, like,
Yeah.
in a pyramid.
Yeah.
So it's not just on yourself, but it's a whole accountability aspect
Yeah.
that everyone needs to be, accounted for.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
So that brings us to our next topic here. As many of you might be thinking about starting your own business, is kind of, the lack or the need that you're trying to fill in your particular business. Because everyone might think at one point or another that they're looking to start their business. Okay, but what's that lack you're actually trying to fill, or that need? And we're going to kind of discuss that. So maybe you could kind of talk about some of the problems that you kind of forecasted in this market before you even started this whole business.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we're doing here at Roots and Roasts in Quincy is we're focusing on local products, like, really. So we're trying to, just step it back a little bit. What we really want this place to be is premium coffee, great food, and building community, right? Community connection. And so as part of that, we are trying to focus on local products, right? So the first thing that I did is, there's a bunch of first things that I did, right? But one of the first things that I did was changing over a few supplier relationships. There's a great company called Specialty Foods Boston, and they actually do a lot of the heavy lifting here for me, because they partner with a bunch of local farms and local suppliers themselves. And so I can get deliveries from them, and that allows me to get farm fresh eggs, farm fresh milk. I'm getting whole wheat flour now, for example, whereas before it was just like they were just using generic, like bleach bromated, flour. And nothing wrong with it. Whatever, people are going to do what people are going to do, and people can eat
Yeah.
whatever they want. Here at my cafe, I want to serve food that I would feel good about eating. So it was important to me that I just got like whole wheat flour. Let's use olive oil. Let's use real syrup, real honey, stupid things, like that. But I feel like they make a difference, and customers seem to be responsive to it. I've had customers coming up to me and like talking to me about the food quality. The food's great. That's important to me. One of the things I'm working on now is getting our cold brew coffee operation up and running, because that's another thing that I want is not like a full coffee bar where you're going as specific as like picking your brand. But for the cold brew side, I think what I will do is doing like a mild, medium, and bold option for people, right? Just so people, if someone is a little bit more of a coffee connoisseur, they have like a little bit of optionality there, right? And I'll do like cold brew coffee served hot, right? Now we have this espresso coffee that we get in here, and we actually have a bunch of Albanians and other groups of people that just like prefer strong coffee. Like they come in here because they want the strong coffee, and it's like I get it. Like, come on in, have our espresso. Our espresso is our number one selling item here, both by quantity and dollar value. Yeah. It's awesome. And then we sell all kinds of like bakery stuff, but we do the full gamut of breakfast and lunch. We're doing eggs and omelets, and we're doing sandwiches and all that stuff. Um, so, like we're just trying to differentiate ourselves with just having that quality option for people. Like I'm not trying to compete with Dunkin' Donuts by being a different Dunkin' Donuts or a better Dunkin' Donuts. I'm competing with Dunkin' Donuts for the people that are going there that are like, because they don't have a better option, right? But if they care about food quality and they care more about the community aspect, and they'd rather have like stuff like sourced locally as much as possible, then here we go. They can come here. That's how we're differentiating ourselves.
Yeah, no,
right?
I think that's a great way to put it, because a lot more businesses, especially in the restaurant industry, a lot of consumers are questioning, okay, what type of produce is that? What's really in that?
Yeah.
So kind of making that image, saying, hey, this is locally grown, this is premium coffee, whatever the case might be.
That's right.
And then number two, what you're doing, which I really like, is bringing the community into here, right? You're shopping local vendors, right? You're making these local partnerships that if someone has a farm up the street, you're more than welcome to come. We're looking to try your produce. Let's see if we can create that meaningful relationship to help better our consumers.
Mhm.
So that's a great way.
Yeah. My lovely wife, she even had the idea that we might start reaching out to local artists and put their art on display on the walls, just to have some like hip art that like kind of rotates in and out. I think people would really like that. But again, just like I said, we're just, that's really what we're going for with a competitive advantage. And we did our research in Quincy, and we got a lot of people our age in that late 20s to early 40s, right? Like kind of that millennial group, where they are a little more health conscious of like what they're trying to eat. And Quincy is definitely the place of like pizzas and donuts and stuff like that, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like I love that stuff too, but I can't eat it all the time, right? So we're trying to be a place where if you are eating on the go all the time, here's a healthy alternative for you. You don't have to stop in South Boston or go further down the South Shore or whatever. You can, you're passing through Quincy, or you're a Quincy resident, you can come right here, and we got you covered.
Perfect. And then maybe we could, for our next talking point, we could talk about more about establishing a business model. Kind of some of the topics, or kind of some of the, we'll say, constraints that you've dealt with establishing this.
Yes.
Because it seems all fun. Until you actually do it.
It seems all fun until you actually do it. That's right.
Maybe kind of talk about some of the hurdles that you've experienced when you first started out. Whether it's maybe applying for an LLC or financing, or some of the struggles that you went through.
Yeah, exactly. And early on is going to be the most tedious part of this whole process. So sorry to break that to you, dear listener. You're going to start by figuring out. So you've at this point, like hopefully you've identified the product or the service that you are trying to put out there in the market that's not being met right now, or maybe you're trying to be disruptive, like you have a better way of doing something. I know I poo-pooed the idea of trying to be a better Dunkin' Donuts, but that's because that's just not how you're going to disrupt Dunkin' Donuts, right? Like, think of like Netflix coming in and disrupting Blockbuster. That was like, like let's stream the video instead of mailing I think they actually did start by mailing DVDs, but let's mail the DVD and then go to streaming versus like having an actual video store, right? That's a disruptive company coming into the market, and that's always an option for someone if they have a legitimate solution to disrupt an industry that way. But anyway, so at this point, hopefully you have a product or service in mind. You're feeling like I'm ready for the responsibility, and you haven't talked to anyone that's talked you out of this horrible idea of yours yet. So you are ready to keep moving. The next thing to really do is figure out how you're going to finance it, and that will kind of you're going to do that in conjunction with starting to put the business model together, because you're going to at least start putting together numbers of like how much money you actually need to finance this thing. So I was buying a cafe. It's like relatively explanatory. Like I came in and checked out the place. We talked with the seller, put together an LOI. I offered a certain amount of money, and that was what was accepted. And it's like, okay, so I need that plus some working capital, and then that's the number that I'm going to put together, right? And work towards. So it might not always be that cut and dry. Like, maybe you're not buying an operating business and then rebranding it. That's what I did here. Maybe you're actually going to start something fresh. So you need to figure out, like, if you're going to be manufacturing something, you need to start looking up your equipment prices, like how much your equipment's going to cost. And you need to know, where are you going to do this? Like, maybe you're doing it in your garage and you're doing 3D printers, and it's like, okay, so your cost is your 3D printers, but maybe you need to lease a site. So you're going to have to look around for leases. You're going to have to figure out what the equipment costs. If you're providing a service, you'll have to figure out, if you're a software developer and you're doing the developing yourself for your website or whatever that's going to be, then great. You know that, and then you just got to figure out, well, am I going to have to contract labor to support that or not? If you are not a software developer and you're going to have hire a software developer, then you should shop around and get some quotes from people, and figure out what your alternatives are going to be. But in any case, you just need to figure out what those initial startup costs are going to be, track them in an Excel file, and then figure out what is the most realistic way to finance it. Now, I did a mix of debt and equity for this place. I did an SBA loan, and then I had some friends and family who wanted to get invested. And so we all formed a limited partnership together. So I am both a general partner and a limited partner with a majority ownership stake in this place. And they are all limited partners, right? So then we had the partnership owning another operating entity. So we have Roots and Roast LLC, which actually owns the cafe, and then the limited partnership that we made owns Roots and Roast, right? So that's another thing to consider, is like, how are you going to set up your entity structure based on what you're doing? Usually it's cut and dry. You just need one company and you just you just own it. But if you're bringing other people in, it's just something to consider. Like, how many layers do you need? One of the reasons we did it this way is because we would like to do a second and third location. And so ideally what that will look like is each location will be its own LLC owned by our partnership.
Yeah.
Right. So then you get into and that's nothing, right? And then you get into the more tedious stuff, because once you figure out, are you going to borrow money, or do you have friends and family plus your own money to invest in it, or a combination of the two? Then you have to start doing the really tedious stuff, which is going through, like, if you're borrowing money, you have to go through all that with the bank. And that was the worst part for me, was going through all the information requests for the bank. So I put together, I'm in investment world, right? So I did the investor disclosure and had the business plan and everything already put together. So I was like very well set up to be going into discussions with the bank, but they still just need so much information. Like, they needed bank accounts from me, bank accounts from my Net Green Consulting LLC. They needed bank accounts from my friends and family, and like a whole plethora of other things. They needed a bunch of information from the seller that wasn't even necessarily stuff that was immediately on my radar as far as due diligence. And so some of it is appreciative, because it's like, you're keeping everyone honest, but then at a certain point, it's just like, like this is all becoming quite tedious very quickly,
Just
right?
write the check.
Yeah. Just write the check already. Um, so anyway, you'll go through that process with your bank. You have to then, as part of that, because the bank will make you do it if you haven't already done it, is get insurance, and insurance is its own animal. I had to get Key Man life insurance in addition to my business insurance. Now the Key Man life insurance is cheap, so it's whatever. It's fine. Like I'm covered. If anything happens to me now, I can sleep peacefully at night. Yeah. Um, so you go through you do the insurance thing. The insurance agents are great. They'll do most of the work for you. It's not like putting a lot on you. It's just more stuff to coordinate. And then solving your banking is the other thing. So I'm just talking about like your checking accounts and whatever. You got to get all that stuff established. Link those up to a QuickBooks or something. Like don't try and do everything manually for your accounting. And you want to do good accounting, because one of the things that I ran into with this place is like no interim financials, right? And it's just like, if you want to be able to sell that business someday, or if you do have investors, or even if you're borrowing money from a bank, you're going to have to report to someone, and it's going to be a lot easier if you're just keeping track of things as you go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you either do it yourself with QuickBooks linked up to your bank account. I'm very adept at finance and accounting, so that's like an easy thing for me to do. I understand if it's not, and in which case you just hire an accountant, because you're just going to have to add that to your business expenses at that point. Yeah. And then there's probably like a few other things here and there. Those are like the big ones that you need to worry about. I had to do for this place. I had to get Serve Safe certification, which is for food safety, right? Food handling safety makes sense. I'm a cafe owner now. Yeah, I got to know how to handle food safely. Know what you need to do for your industry, right? Net green. I had other things that I had to concern myself with, as far as just like making sure that I had all my regulations like checked, right? Any industry is going to have regulation of some kind, so it's your job to know it. Again, we go back to that responsibility point, right? You need to know the regulations. You need to know where you're meeting them and failing them, and you need to do something about the ones that you're not up to speed on. And that's the big stuff for the tedious part. And then you get to have a little bit of fun. You get to build an actual forecast as part of your business model. So you come up with your business plan, which I had an executive summary format, which was I think like maybe 2 pages. It was like a 1-pager, like bulleted out, and then the second page was just like a couple screenshots of the financials, like the financial forecast. Building it out a little bit more. I mean, the full business plan wasn't even that much longer. There was just like a little more color in there about like the market and stuff, which I just did like a write up on like the Quincy area. There's like some buildings going up nearby, both residential and like commercial offices, right? And so that was important stuff to know, because it's like, hey, any business that we get now, we have a 300 unit residential building going up like less than a block away, right? Like that's awesome. We have a medical office building going up, again, less than a block away. I can't wait to have those customers. That's good. That'll be a good day.
Yeah, that's right.
So those are the things that you want to just consider, is like your what is your actual plan for the business? What is the product or service you're going to be providing? What is the market like? Your competitive advantages, your disadvantages, and you go through the whole gambit there. And then you got to put together your projections. Your projections should be realistic. I had a basis to go off of for this place, because he had been operating it for a couple of years. And so I just put some like reasonable growth expectations. What they weren't doing much marketing, so most of our growth, I assume, will just come from like a revamped marketing effort, and the rebranding, I assume, will get us some growth as well. But honestly, like between the rebranding and just like actually marketing, I think that that's where most of our growth will come from. And then like new buildings going up, which is always good. And then you just have to go through your expenses and know, like, it's really ideally you should know what your monthly expenses are, but you should, at the very least, you need to know what your annual expenses are. And if you can break them down monthly, then that's perfect, because then you can do a break-even analysis on like what do we need our sales to be month over month to be able to break even, and then for the year, what does that look like? You should always do a break-even analysis as part of doing your projections, and you should You want to pay attention to your gross margin, which is your revenue minus your cost of goods sold. And you want to pay attention to your operating margin, which is your gross margin minus all of your kind of operating expenses, right? Which are the things that you are not considering cost of goods sold. Now, here at my cafe, it's inventory, it's food. We bring food in, we cook it, we sell it. That's our cost of goods sold. Our payroll, our rent, those are the two biggest other expenses. But then there's other things like utilities, insurance. Those are all of our operating expenses, right? And um, you have to know what those are going to be. Those are going to be different by industry, but payroll and rent, I mean, that's a pretty standard across the board. Like everyone's going to have those expenses to consider. If maybe you own the building, but if you own the building, great, good for you, congratulations. Yeah. Then you probably have other headaches that you're going to have to include on that operating expense, like building, all the building maintenance and upkeep is going to fall on you. So you have to consider that, like know your replacement costs for manufacturing equipment. If you have manufacturing equipment, I have to know my replacement costs for all my like coolers and display cases and things like that, right? So just things like that to consider when you're doing your projections. You do at least 5 years. It's going to be a little hazy what it looks like in 5 years. You want to have you start by doing your first year. So it's like, all right, next 12 months, what does that look like? And then you extend that out for a few years, just to see like, okay, how can we scale profitability if we can execute this next 12 months the way we plan to? How do we scale it from there for the next 4 years after that? And then like at the end of 5 years, what are we looking at for gross margin, operating margin? That's probably the most important part of that. And then yeah, and then you kind of have your business model put together. I mean, there's a lot of facets to go through, and I know you have like a whole list of points that we can like start talking about from there. So I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, and I hope you learned something so far.
Yeah.
I know we discussed a lot, but I think the first key aspect is bringing us back to the beginning is knowing yourself, right? Are you up for the task to actually make this happen? And then what kind of a competitive advantage that you could create in a marketplace you're looking to establish a business. So let's talk. I know we talked a lot about a lot of these things. Maybe let's talk about reducing risk. How
Mm.
can you reduce risk for a coffee shop you just created? Maybe there's something you can reduce.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've done here to reduce risk is I'm trying to keep all the existing customers happy, right? Because I don't want to come in with a total rebrand and then be accused of like changing too much too quickly and then driving people away, right? So for me, reducing risk looks like I want to maintain as many customers as I can while I grow some of the new demographics that I expect to get, right? So like I know people are coming in here because they like the strong coffee. I know people are coming in because they like our croissants and some of the other pastries that we sell. It's like, okay, perfect. That stuff stays. That's not going anywhere. I'm going to add to it, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to add the cold brew coffee and the mild, medium, bold optionality, right? Like that's just a value add. Those customers can partake if they want to, right? But if they don't want to, fine. Keep drinking your espresso, keep getting your croissants. I'm happy. You're happy, 100%. Right? So it's like looking for opportunities like that. You have to think about like going back to that break-even analysis, right? That ties into your reducing risk options and like what you can consider there, because you that will give you like what are the base level of sales that I need to at least achieve like not losing money. As part of that, you need to know like how much money can you afford to lose, right? So like I gave myself a little cushion. It's not like I have to break even every month, obviously. And that's something you should consider is like you have to know your burn rate, right? This is particularly important for software companies because software companies tend to backload their sales and front load their costs, right? Because you have development costs up front and it's going to take you some time to get everything in line so that you can start servicing customers. And in between those front-loaded costs and those back-loaded sales is kind of that period where you're actually going to be going after customers, right? So you got to know, like, this is how much cash I have on hand. This is what our payroll expense and these other operating expenses look like. And this is how many months we're going to be able to persist as is. So we need to hit these milestones to be sure that we're not running out of money, right? And so when you want to reduce risk, you have to think about, well, what are the risk factors to you running out of money? That's like the number one thing. It's like, what are the risks that I just run out of money and this whole thing like collapses, right? And you need to think about like what you can do to defer those risks so that they're like either happening later, or you need to just mitigate them by like lessening their impact, right? So for me, that was focusing on the customers. Like, I don't want just everyone that's coming in here now, I don't want them saying like, well, forget this place, like I'm not coming in, and then all of a sudden my sales are $0 every day for the first month. It's like that would cause problems for me.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, we talked about knowing yourself, competitive advantages in your marketplace. We went through kind of the structure of financing, how you did a little bit of debt and equity partnerships. Let's talk more about building a team, more
Hmm.
specifically an agile team, and maybe talking about kind of hiring for adaptability, just because there's a lot of things that go on in the business,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
You're making coffee, you're serving food, you're cleaning tables, so there's a lot going on.
Yep.
So kind of what do you look for when you're establishing that team and looking to hire staff?
Yeah, I hit the jackpot with the people that I have here now because I have two people working up front for the service area, and I have someone who is doing the baking right now. All of them are great. The two that run the service area, they're very good at helping me manage the inventory. I didn't have to ask them. They just got in the habit of like they make lists for me. They send it to me. Like, I'm sure they were already doing that with the prior owner anyway. So like they probably like had that figured out. But there's a lot of things that just solve themselves. And so like the reason I mention this though is because those are the attributes you want to look for in people, even when you're hiring them or when you're looking for who you should be rewarding, is the people who will take initiative and just like know what needs to be done, and they will go after it and get it. Like they're the people that are going to be the achievers, right? This is something too that I've run into with NetGreen, looking at like doing our own competitive analysis. A lot of other and we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, even, is like a lot of other companies were getting themselves into trouble by just like hiring too many people, because it's like you don't have that many jobs to fill, like you just don't.
Yeah.
And a lot of that could have been like contract labor, because it's like more project based work. So that's another thing that you have to consider, is like that what's full time versus what is a project. Because stuff that's a project, maybe your full time people have capacity to take it on, but if they don't, then like that's not a new full time role, that's a contract role, right? And the the best part of like having an adaptable team and an agile team is just that when a problem arises, there's no panic. No one's hitting the panic button, right? People like those types of people that are willing to be flexible and adjust to problems as they arise. They're very valuable, because they don't just drop the ball and then everything is coming to you and all of a sudden everything is your problem. It's like, I'm going to have plenty of problems of my own. So like if you guys can solve a few before they get to me, then great. And so you want those people that will take the initiative and figure things out for themselves. They do that very well here. And that's really the Patriot mentality too. To talk about the New England Patriots now, and we're not ashamed of it. And they had that motto of like, do your job, right? But everyone knew each other's job too, right? Because everything was about redundancy. It's like you do your job and you do it well, but you should know everyone else's job too. So that like if like Pete can't come in today, it's like it's all right because Joe knows how to do Pete's job, and so Joe's going to get it done.
You have to be cross-functional,
Yeah,
regardless
cross-functional, exactly.
no matter what function you're doing.
Yep,
know,
that's right.
So
Yep,
it goes a long
exactly.
way.
Yeah, and it gets you a lot further in the startup environment, because you even if you have the capital, you should be stringent with it. That's another thing that companies do very poorly often, is like they get access to a bunch of capital up front and then they're overly frivolous with it, right? And it's like, no, you should still be stringent, because again, going back to what we were talking about with risk mitigation, you need to know what your burn rates are, but you also want to prolong those as long as you can. So you want to squeeze every second out of every dollar that you can, right? And time is always working against you. You know,
Yeah.
it, we're all going to wither to time someday. You know, and so it's something that needs to be considered is that you want to make your dollars last as long as you can. And so you should be hiring more agile teams that can do more with less people. It's just a thing that gets overlooked a lot. It's also important in startup world because you can do all the planning you want to do, but new things are just going to be popping up, and you want people that can just like step up and be like, oh, I can take that on. You know, that's an important thing to consider. Is just like there's always going to be curveballs thrown your way. You know, and you just want people that can hit a curveball.
That's
Yeah.
right. Always swinging.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, hey, I think you did a great job.
Thanks, man.
So I think we went through all the business topics. I hope you guys learned a little bit today about kind of establishing your own brand, your business, talking about competitive advantages, obviously talking about hiring agile teams. Anything else you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, I mean, like just a overall comment is owning a business is awesome. It comes with, but it comes with headaches like anything else in life, and you should never feel better or worse than anyone else or your past self or anything just because you do or don't own a business. Like, there's no shame to be had in just working a corporate job or working a blue collar job. Blue collar jobs are awesome. If I could afford to just be a carpenter like my father and still live here in Massachusetts, I'd probably go for it. But
Yeah.
you got childcare concerns and other things that pop up, and it's like you just have to be realistic about what's the life you want to live and what can you do to produce the income or the means to live that life, right?
Yeah.
And so I've decided that I want to be a businessman. I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm passionate about. With the food service industry, I used to work at a grocery store. I loved that job. I was just a manager at a grocery store, and just you go in, you do your thing.
Yeah.
You're doing like you're unpacking freight boxes. You're putting milk in coolers, and you're answering questions for customers. You go up and you run the register for the cashier for a little bit. Then you go back in the back and you're like cutting steaks and everything. Like, I just like that. It's honest work. Like I like
Yeah.
doing stuff with my hands. So anyway, I would just say like never be ashamed of anything you're going to do. Owning a business is awesome. Do it if you can. Do it if it's the right fit for you and you got like a real problem that you can solve. Do it. Live your
Yeah.
dream. But never have any shame, no matter what you do.
Yeah. Hope you learned something. Thank you for tuning in on the Better Business Podcast. Drop any questions or comments to Rob or myself, Mike. I'm happy to help you and guide you through some of the problems that we've dealt with and some of the successes that we've dealt with. And happy to chat about that.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you for the next one.